Pale and dressed entirely in white, she resembled a wraith, a ghostly bride. The priest felt a shiver run down his spine. Where had she come from? Clearly, this was a secret marriage. There were no relatives in sight. If only he had known whom he was marrying. In the mid-19th century, the English were captivated by the works of the mysterious Elizabeth Barrett. This young lady penned astonishing poetry, and the public quickly and gratefully embraced her. Yet, no one had ever seen the poetess. And in the absence of information, speculation ran rampant. People whispered various theories about Elizabeth. Perhaps she wasn't the true author at all, but rather an elderly man posing as a lady. Or maybe her poems had been written long ago, lying dormant in a trunk for a century, only to be published now by a cunning entrepreneur. There was even a romantic tale of a beautiful captive held prisoner by a stern husband. And the most far-fetched of all, Miss Barrett received her verses in dreams and transcribed them onto paper each morning. The idle public could concoct any number of stories. The reality was, of course, much more mundane. Elizabeth was born into the family of a well-off West Indian planter. She received an excellent home education, spoke several languages, began reading ancient authors at an early age, translated works herself, and by the age of 16 had already written a poem. She was a talented, intelligent, and quite attractive young woman. But she had one flaw. She was extremely, painfully nervous. When the family settled in London, the move significantly impacted Elizabeth Barrett's mental health. She was terrified of thunder and would hide in closets during storms. She couldn't tolerate sunlight and spent all her time in rooms with the curtains drawn, illuminated only by candles. Even stepping outside was a struggle for her. Everything frightened her. During her panic attacks, she would stop eating altogether. The Barrett family was at their wits' end with Elizabeth. The only thing that could distract her was talking about poetry. Her eyes would light up with enthusiasm. They suggested she publish her work and sent her poems to a newspaper. Soon, a collection was released. Elizabeth found success. The reading public in London was talking only about her. Just when they thought she was starting to come alive again, her brother Edward died. This plunged Miss Barrett into such a deep depression that she withdrew even further into herself. Robert Browning, a young philosopher and poet, dreamed of meeting Elizabeth. He found her address through a publisher and wrote to her. To his delight, she replied. The exchange of letters continued for several months, and soon the poet was invited to visit. He walked there, trembling with a mix of joy and fear. When he finally saw Miss Barrett, his heart raced. Robert Browning had fallen in love. The mysterious poetess appeared so delicate, so pale, so ethereal, like a ghostly bride. But her father was very much flesh and blood, and he swiftly put an end to the young man's courtship. Edward Barrett, the planter, knew that his daughter was unwell. As a loving father, he feared that the poet would break Elizabeth's heart. After losing his son, he couldn't bear the thought of losing his daughter as well, so he forbade her from seeing Robert. From then on, the young couple communicated in secret, taking advantage of the father's absences. A whole year passed this way. One day, Robert decided enough was enough. He was in love, and he was loved in return. Something had to be done. At that time, there were strict rules governing marriages, and one couldn't simply show up at a church and demand to be wed. There was an entire protocol to follow, but there were also ways around it. For instance, in exceptional cases, one could apply for a special marriage license. And that's exactly what Robert Browning did. Taking care to obtain the license ahead of time, he married his beloved in the church of Marylebone. The bride was pale, and her dress made her look like a vision. The newlyweds traveled to the continent, to Italy. Her father could not forgive her for her defiance. He refused to respond to her letters and cut her off from her inheritance. Yet, astonishingly, she almost fully recovered. She gave birth to a son, traveled with her husband, and wrote beautiful poetry. Fate granted her 15 blissful years. Elizabeth Barrett Browning passed away in Florence. Yet her poetry lives on. We'd rather stay here on earth among men, who despise the spirit and the spiritual together, where love is only allowed a single day. In the midst of darkness and flickering death,